Gamebreaker TV.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to GuildCast, episode 13 from March 8th, 2012. You're watching Gamebreaker TV. I am Mike Schaffnitz. I've donned on the new skin that I bought, like I said last week. Coming up on GuildCast today, Trinity. We just can't stop talking about it. We gotta talk about it in threes due to the fact that it's the Trinity. Also coming up, luckily for us, ArenaNet also like to talk about PvP. All that and more, plus your viewer questions. But first, we have the BFF reports, legendaries, gameplay. What else? Any other crazy things, Mr. Mike B?
No, that's it.
Well, how you doing, Mike? How's it going?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing.
Are you
wonderful.
recovered from yesterday? That's great. Fantastic. All right, bye.
All right, bye. And Elizabeth Claire, not Ruby. Elizabeth
Not
Claire.
Ruby.
How are you, Elizabeth?
I'm doing well. Thanks.
Excellent. All right, so let's just jump right into it here, guys. ArenaNet's Eric Flanham crushed the dreams of all those Guild Wars fans who just can't get enough of the Trinity. I got that right, didn't I? We love the Trinity here, right? We love it? Trinity? We all support it?
Yeah, not so much.
No?
No.
Well, love it or hate it. Here's what Eric actually had to say over on the Guild Wars 2 Guru forums. Players could make a build that resembles the Trinity, but it could never truly be the Trinity. You cannot, for example, make a dedicated healer no matter how much you pump into your support trait lines. When you start getting to tougher encounters, no matter how much armor and health you have, you will never be able to stand toe-to-toe for long against most of the foes that you will face. So, Trinity dead. Yeah, we've said it before, but the Trinity is dead. He's pretty much coming out and saying that you cannot form the Trinity. I didn't get a chance to jump into the beta here, guys. How does this work? Like, how are they going to make it so that one person can't take a lot of damage? Is it just make dungeons chaos in terms of how you don't have a tank or maybe don't have a healer? How does this play out?
You first, by all means.
Sorry. So I only ran the one dungeon that they had available, and my class had the ability to heal himself, and I did that a lot. But there was another class, I think it was like an engineer or something, that was dropping like these healing type devices in the ground, and I just basically stand in the circle and I get like a little bit of heal. But there was nobody was throwing around like fat heals or anything, but there was kind of this okay, this person's going to be watching other players' health, but it is ultimately kind of up to us to, in the end, kind of babysit ourselves. Like if I die because I didn't throw any heals on myself, then it's really that's the onus is on me and not on the person who's supposed to be the dedicated healer. They're there to support you, but not to save you every time your ass needs to be saved. So that's why there's like the soft Trinity, I guess you could say.
Well, in some cynics,
Soft Trinity.
Go ahead.
Go for it.
No.
By all means.
Oh, I was just gonna say some cynics are basically coming out and saying that you're just gonna be constantly swapping roles throughout a fight. Does that mean that the Trinity is dead, or that it just kind of shifts throughout the course of a fight? Because you still are gonna have your person who's essentially a tank, and you're still gonna have someone who's essentially doing heals at one point. It just might be switching, like I said, throughout the course of the fight. Is that kind of what's going on here, or?
This is a matter of huge debate because most people are saying it's a popular consensus that, yeah, the Trinity still exists and people are just going to be swapping roles of the Trinity a lot more. I think that as we think about it, like the Holy Trinity is a dedicated tank, a dedicated healer, and dedicated DPS, and that just doesn't work here. There are so many more ways to support your allies than just healing them that anybody who tries to just do heals is not going to work. And it's also it's a game format that doesn't require necessarily always switching your roles, but it really, your combat always benefits if you do that.
Would you say how important really does kiting mobs in Guild Wars 2 come into play with CC abilities and dodge? Is that almost going to be replacing traditional tanking if they're saying that there's not one person who can stand up and start absorbing damage?
God, you know, I wish I had more time to go through and run that dungeon just over and over and over again to really just kind of beat it in. And plus, the experience I had, I was rolling with like two devs, so it was not necessarily a this is what it's like when you roll with pugs type scenario. But you know, there were definitely moments where I was absorbing a lot of damage. And it ended in me either dying, which happened, or jumping off of a small cliff and hoping that I live, so that way at least I'm LOSing the boss. But you know, it's difficult because the mechanics that we saw, you know, they lend themselves to you could dodge them, but you could also mitigate them and heal yourself, or have somebody else heal you. There's like so many different ways of getting out of it. You know, it's funny. The more I think about this whole like there's no Trinity thing, then really it just sounds to me like almost like someone's gonna stab me in the face for this, but like a squad slash PvE based third-person shooter. To me, that's what it sounds like. It's like if everybody has kind of the same abilities, that you have a range, you have a melee, whatever, but nobody's really there to be dedicated to a role, that it's almost kind of like some, you know, like, and I don't mean like squad-based shooters where there's like a medic and like Team Fortress and stuff, where the people have dedicated roles, but it just seems very like everybody can do everything, and you go in there and you just kind of handle your business.
How
and
are
if
they?
you want to help the next, huh?
How are they gonna manage that though? Like in a fight, I guess. Like how do you tell where you need to like when someone's gonna be necessarily taking damage? Is there like no aggro table, or how do you okay, if one person can't take damage and the boss is hitting them, how do you get the boss off them so that they don't die and it starts hitting someone else? How is that managed?
I think as a kind of a quibble here, they're saying that one person can't stand in the same place and soak up all the damage for all the time. That's an ineffective model for Guild Wars 2. But you can still have people who are running control, who are either catching the boss's attention and making them run around so that other people can do the fighting, or who are momentarily taking it and then running off and swapping. So you have kind of, you don't have a stationary tank who stands in front of the boss so that all the boss's aggro is on them. Sometimes that means that aggro goes a little astray, and you have to kind of manage that crisis as it pops up. But and yes, dodging and kiting are very important. It's not a game where anyone really, I feel, can stand super still for most of the time.
Some classes have mitigating type abilities. Like I remember I was doing one of the PvP match with Mesmer, and then I ran up this little ramp, and somebody just straight dropped like a force field or something. Very similar to a force field you'd see from like a Protoss unit in StarCraft 2. And that stopped me in my tracks. I couldn't go past it. And there's also, I think, the Guardian, I want to say, has an ability where he can lay down like an invisible wall of some sort. And a couple classes have this stuff. So there are ways that you could mitigate damage, but that doesn't... But you can't really classify that. Like, okay, so I have a class that could throw down a wall. That doesn't make you like a tank, because you're just throwing down a wall for like X amount of seconds and that's it. It just kind of makes you a support class of sorts.
Well, that's why I feel.
Go ahead.
I feel that the term soft trinity is really useful as far as more generalized roles. So you have control, support, and damage. So controlling where the enemy is as important as controlling who they're attacking. So those things like the walls and the different domes that Guardians can throw up and Mesmers can throw up are really important as far as controlling the mob more than tanking it.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean the other thing here that you kind of mentioned, Elizabeth, is with kiting. Kiting always just feels a lot more engaging than just standing there and shooting something. I mean, even if you're, you know, one of those DPS in the Trinity roles, it's got to feel a lot better to make you actively have to move around than just sit there and start spamming, you know, 2 or 3 abilities to keep up your rotation. Do you think that all of the classes in Guild Wars 2 are going to have some sort of CC ability to help keep mobs off them, though? Since you guys are basically saying there's multiple responsibilities that are going to be going out, are we going to see a lot of different classes with different CC abilities?
Well, the dodge gives you the dodge that pretty much everybody has is that option to help mitigate, because when you're dodging something, you're essentially mitigating damage to yourself. And then, you know, for example, the Maverick, this is me playing, isn't it?
Yes, this is.
He looks familiar. Anyways, I have an ability called, I think, Death Shroud, where I go into I change forms, like almost like a demon type form, and that has saved me a number of times. Where I run up, I've taken a lot of damage, and then I would shroud myself. So everybody has like these mitigating type abilities to allow us to manage mobs and all of that stuff. So it is the soft Trinity is definitely a good way of putting it. But saying that it's dead, it's difficult to say that it's dead because you do have roles. They just constantly swap, and it lends itself to people having to be reliable in more than one way.
I was going to say,
stand there and just soak up damage.
I really like this idea because it's going to force every player to be very aware of their own save buttons. Like there's so many encounters out there now within MMOs that DPS just don't really necessarily pay attention to anything, and when it comes time that they need to hit something to save their life, 9 times out of 10 they don't end up doing it. So this is actually a really nice model that's going to, from the very get-go, introduce, every player of kind of being aware of hitting a button to save their life when they need to.
For sure. Also going back to CC, because positional gameplay is so important as far as not being right in the line of damage, I think every class, for the most part, has a way of slowing down enemies and a way of moving themselves very quickly to a different location. For example, the Elementalist is always easy to use as an example. They can freeze the ground around foes, thereby slowing the foes and making them chilled. And they also have, like you have the Mesmer who can teleport areas. The Engineer has, I think, a rifle skill that lets them jump somewhere very quickly or knock a foe back.
Like
Warriors have, yes, Warriors have a lot of knockdowns for foes and a couple skills that will teleport them or launch them places more quickly. The Guardian has the same thing. So you see most professions having the ability to be very positional in their gameplay and very aware of where they are in relation to mobs.
Well, Eric actually goes on to say with his post here that even a 5-person group that has 3 DPS-focused characters, a support-focused character, and a damage-soaking character will not play anything like a standard Trinity group. That I can wrap my head around that, but it's the next part that actually kind of scares me a little bit here is if those players insisted on playing like a standard Trinity group, they could succeed against easier content in the game, but probably couldn't finish a story mode dungeon, let alone an explorable dungeon. Isn't that Explorer mode? I could be wrong. Or some of the tougher events in the game. So a lot of MMO players haven't played the original Guild Wars game and they're looking at Guild Wars 2. Do you think such a radical change here in gameplay is going to leave a lot of people with a bad impression?
Doesn't that statement kind of it kind of reads kind of funny. It's like he's saying if players are bad, they might still get past the easy stuff. But if they're good, then they might do okay with the newer stuff. It's like well, that's just the way games are, right? I mean, if you have a bunch of players that are bad, you could probably skirt your way past a couple of easy things. Look at the looking for raid feature in World of Warcraft. You get a whole bunch of people just in their face rolling the keyboard, and you could still actually win. A couple base mechanics, and that's pretty much it. But no, it's funny. It again, this goes back to saying that players are going to have to be more mindful of their abilities and the capabilities of their character in order to be successful in doing, like he says, some of the harder stuff.
Yeah, but
essentially, you have to be good at the game.
I feel like that with that statement though, even let's say we have the same players playing in a non-Trinity group, and then they go and play in a Trinity group. I feel like he might necessarily be coming out and saying that the Trinity group is going to fail. Even if it was the same players at the same skill level with the same gear, he's saying the Trinity group is going to fail. How is that gonna, affect encounter design? Do you need 5 people DPSing at all times in order to kill something? Is that the way that this is gonna be?
No, I think exactly what it's doing is making it so that you don't need a specific group setup. You just need players who are aware of how best to use their characters. And the best use of your character is not necessarily to limit it to a very specific dedicated role. Most of the weapons make it really easy to switch up what you're doing. Like you can have a very offensive weapon set and a more defensive weapon set. So even just making proper use of the mechanics provided to you you will always do better than someone who isn't. And so again, it's kind of like what Mike B was saying. Like if you're a good player who knows how to adapt to your game, you're going to do well. If you refuse, if you're like, no, I only ever want to use the sword and I only ever want to stand right in the path of aggro, you're not going to necessarily meet with so much success because the game's not designed for that.
Are you guys surprised with this?
And the game.
Go ahead.
The game clearly is going to have its own system. I mean, if it goes the way he's saying, it's going to have its own built-in system of essentially filtering out the people who don't want to adapt and the ones who do. The ones who do are going to be the ones that are going to be able to take on the harder modes and explorable and all that stuff. But obviously, the ones who don't want to adapt and are just stuck in their ways, they're just standing in front of a mob and just hitting buttons. And I don't understand why I'm dead. I'm holding a shield. I don't get it. Those are the ones that will not make it into those modes. So your parties are essentially going to eventually filter into these groups, these two completely different groups. The ones who can't make it make sense or won't, and the ones who do. So eventually, depending on where you fall, you won't see the other group at all.
Right. Are you guys surprised at all that they, given the fact that they want to go this route, that they're pretty much saying that Trinity is going to have a harder time playing through dungeons than a non-standard group, since they're so heavy on pushing that Trinity is not what you're going to want to do in this game? Did we cut out?
You can't see, but Elizabeth is shrugging.
Oh. Wait. Go ahead. There we go. Do you think, well, depending on the difficulty level of content in a 5-man dungeon group, in other games, a lot of time it will be successful if the tank and healer know what they're doing, even if the 3 DPS really aren't paying attention and can't even hold their weight. With the way that Guild Wars 2 is doing things, do you guys think that everyone in the group is really going to have to be able to know what they're doing to get through, obviously, the tougher difficulties, but maybe even the lesser difficulties?
I think that really depends on the kind of content you're facing. For example, in big open world events, like when there were 30 people taking on the Shadow Behemoth, as long as a couple people were savvy enough to get out of the way so that they could res people after the massive AoE wiped everybody, the whole group did okay, and everybody made it through to the end and got their reward. And it didn't really as long as people were pointing their arrows in the right direction, they were going to succeed, because there were enough people there who knew what was going on, and everyone was just putting out such massive damage that it was okay. But I feel like in especially explorable mode dungeons and most PvP formats, everybody's going to need to be a competent fighter of whatever profession they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
So, Mike, did you have something?
No. I'm saying yeah. Indeed.
So essentially, the Trinity as we know it is dead. We can safe to say that with this game, they're kind of coming out and telling us Trinity isn't going to work. But with every game, no matter what you do, no matter how you try and change it, there's always going to be a most optimal setup. Do you guys think that even though it might not be the Trinity, do you think that there's going to be something that surfaces that ends up being a new Trinity or whatever we want to call it, as what people kind of expect and need for every dungeon?
It'll be like builds, right? I mean, depending on your weapon, like what weapons you currently have equipped, and that will determine like what skills you have. So obviously, there's going to be situations where, depending on where who your teammates are and what their build is, then your build has to essentially be there to support theirs, as well as putting out damage, as everybody is a support class. My Necromancer, in this footage here, I have 2 sets that I keep switching out between. I have 2 sets, but I kept on swapping weapons because I had no idea what I was doing. And I found a combination that actually was it was like every ability had some kind of heal component to it, but also I believe also did damage as well, but it was more of like a healing focused. So that could be like a requirement. It's like, well, we have 2 people that are going to have a more healing focused deck, and then they could swap out for like a more offensive based deck. So yeah, I think that's going to become a bit more of like the standard, because there's always going to be a best setup.
Right.
Whenever you're talking about a group, especially when you get down to like 5 people. If it was like 25 people, then suddenly the line's going to blur a little bit. But when you have like 5 people, and if the stuff is legitimately hard, then people are going to develop things that are just flat out work better than others.
I agree with that for the most part. I think that I'm hoping that most of that is really simple balance stuff. Like if everyone has to run a staff because every staff is OP, hopefully they'll be able to nerf those skills. And as I think we've talked about on the show before, the system's a lot better set up for that now, for very quick and easy and effective balancing. I also think that while there will probably be builds that are recognized as being the most successful, a lot of it, if you're going through playing with buddies or with a specific pug that you keep returning to, will hopefully really be based around your playstyle. Like if I'm in a group with a necro, I'm probably going to want to bring a build that has a lot more conditions on it, because the necromancer kind of thrives off that. At least 2 of their weapon sets have skills that feed off conditions and do more damage for more conditions and that sort of thing. So whereas maybe if I'm not running with a necro, I don't really care so much about conditions, so I run with a build that I like more or I find more effective for other things. So hopefully it'll be really tailored to how you play and how the people you play with play.
Well, we'll see. We'll see how this develops. Obviously, Trinity is such a big topic. We keep hearing more and more about it, the more news that comes out. Real quick, just want to take a moment and thank everybody out there who has donated to Gamebreaker TV. We really appreciate it. Helps us do what we do here. If you haven't yet, but you like what you see, please consider throwing up a donation. $1, $10, $20,000. We really appreciate it, and it really helps go back into creating more content for you guys. So moving on here, Zam sat down with ArenaNet's John Peters to talk some P versus P. Among other things, when asked about adding some competition to the PvE side of the game with leaderboards for completing dungeons quickly, John had this to say. He said, we did do some stuff like that in Guild Wars factions, so it's something we do enjoy. However, there are no current plans for this. Were you guys a fan of this in the original game? Is this something that you guys would like to see added as a PvE competition-based leaderboard?
It's something that cropped up. I actually did enjoy it, and I had one guild that for a couple months it was our big thing to go out and do those and make the leaderboard and have fun with that. So it's something I'm fond of. That said, dungeons are really different here in Guild Wars 2, especially the explorable mode, which would be, I feel like, the one that had more of the competition-based side of things because it's meant to be more challenging. But I think the way that explorable dungeons work for the most part is that you have 2 to 5, I think. I think most of them have about 3 options to take to go through it. Like, you're trying to do this objective or you're trying to complete this objective, so that it's different every time you go through if you make different choices. And I think that would make it very difficult to have a very, very standard, like, this group did the best run through because they had the shortest time, when that might depend a lot on which story option you take.
I think that's kind of funny. It's like, all right, let's talk about PvP. All right, so
PvE.
So PvE dungeons, guys.
PvE, by the way. I was thinking about that too, but it is still PvP. It's still player versus the player for leaderboards. It's
still competition. Yeah, you're right. It's still competition. If they thought it was successful in the first one, and then we're seeing something like this coming out with World of Warcraft. Everybody knows World of Warcraft borrows from like other games, and other games borrow off of World of Warcraft. I mean, it's just everybody borrows off of everybody, especially the stuff that is clearly successful. They have a mode coming in with MOP called Challenge Mode, and that's going to have these types of, I think it's Challenge Mode, these types of elements of where it's competition based and all that. I don't know to what extent. I'm sure we'll find out at the press event. But if they thought that their version of it in Guild Wars 1 was successful, which they're saying that it is, and then they see that people still like doing that, like when MOP comes out, then I don't see why they wouldn't later on add that kind of stuff in, because I think there are a lot of people that do enjoy doing competitive things. So why not add something in there that people clearly like? Sure.
And it makes kind of sense to wait until you know that people, there's a lot of other things that they could be investing their time into, so maybe you wait to see and make sure that that's going to be something that is of value, and instead of rush to get that out there as well, kind of craft what they've kind of got going on. Do you think that a group like this would tie into like the efficiency setup that we were talking about before, where it's find the most optimal group, and then that kind of becomes a standard of what you have to effectively run these speed runs?
That would just be another reason to go and flesh out what the perfect build would be for doing whatever it is that they're doing. It just takes a reason to create competition. Like there's just so for example, or to create these types of perfect decks or whatever you want to call them. Either it's this is what works because this is a very difficult encounter, so you absolutely have to do this. Or in this situation this is a competitive thing, so in order for you to compete, you have to do this.
Could that maybe be why?
Either way, they just need an excuse. They'll come up with it.
Could that maybe be why ArenaNet's staying away from it though? Is they don't want to force people into those optimal builds here to be able to compete, and that's why they're maybe pushing it off?
No, I think the reason they're pushing it off is because they already have a game that's clearly going to have a lot of content in it launching. They want to probably, instead of coming in with some half-assed product, maybe just push that off until players are at the point where they've seen all the content, they're done with it, and they would like to have some kind of meta-style game, which essentially that's what this is. They're creating a meta game within, which that's like what it means. I'm kind of redundant. So they're going to wait until players kind of get through the content, and they're ready for something new, and then they'll come out with it. And at least by then, we'll know it's going to be a finished product, not something that's going to slap on for launch.
Right. Also, while I'm thinking about it, most dungeons have not really dynamic events, but specific random events that pop up. And I feel like if you were right away before players really understood that, giving people a timing thing and someone was going through it for a timing and a random event popped up that they'd never seen before, people would rage. Like if you're going through and you really want to set a time and suddenly all these gravelings pop up where you've never seen them before, I can see people getting relatively upset about that if they didn't know that that was already a thing that happened.
Yeah, right. That's part of that's probably one of the things that would be on the list of things that would make this a half-assed product.
For sure. Because if you, like nobody likes random when they're trying to compete with other people.
No,
Exactly.
not at all. Well, when asked about PvP progression, John had this to say. We have tournaments for more organized players. Those are focused in 5v5 tournaments and are the true replacement for Guild vs. Guild. We'll have some more of those in the future. Now, even if it's not under, the tournament category, will Guild Wars be able to send a full group into regular battlegrounds here, from the sounds of this?
I have no idea, actually. I know that in Hot Join PvP you can all say, we're going to join this same server, but I don't really, without them saying more about it, I have no idea. Mike, do you have speculation?
I mean, would they allow a group of organized individuals into a regular
battleground
organized PvP match?
Yeah.
I don't see why not, because we see it happen in pretty much every game. I mean, why not let people in? Yeah, granted, they're probably going to win because they have an organized group, but that's not always the case.
Do we know if tournaments are going to be on the same maps as the battlegrounds that we've seen, like Battle for Kyolo, for example?
I have no idea.
Do you mean the same maps, or do you mean the same like gameplay type?
I think both, really. I mean, are we going to be seeing the same? Are people going to be able to use their practice and apply that to battle, like what was it, Guild vs. Guild tournaments?
Oh, I'm sure. Like, I not sure as in I have confirmation, but I imagine that would be the case, that it's a very similar, at least gameplay setup. I don't know if the maps will be identical. I think it kind of makes sense if they were vaguely familiar, but I'm sure that it'll be a very similar kind of scenarios to what you see in Hot Join.
Are we dancing around the will Guild Wars 2 have 5v5 arena?
No, don't you? Oh, I thought you were gonna say the MMO curse word, esports. Shh.
Why don't you go on to the next question then?
I was gonna say that. I have a feeling that's not far off.
But I already said it. So which would you guys rather see? Would you guys want to see something objective based or simple team deathmatch? Which lends itself to esports better? Mike, I think you've actually touched on this before, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, lots of times. I think that, and actually we did a short story with this on Gamebreaker, talking about can Guild Wars 2 be an esport? I did a long piece actually. I think just to summarize, TLDR, what makes an esport so great to watch is the objectives are easy to understand. The casters make it exciting. and the game is fun to watch. Like, I mean, really, you have to have like there's probably more things. I have more fingers. I probably could put more things. But really, it's like if you have like those three things, it's exciting to watch. The objectives are easy to understand, and the people are making it exciting. Just in the way they're casting it. Then yeah, you could definitely turn this Guild Wars 2 into an esport. I mean, when I did my Mesmer PvP match, I just went through and just kind of excitedly casted what I was doing, and people really liked it. And it works. It totally works. You can make this stuff exciting, especially when people know and understand what's going on. It's a resource-based game or a gameplay style where you have to go and get enough resources to be the first person to like 5 or first team to 500. So you could definitely make it happen.
And I think
the right people to make it happen.
I forget what show this was on, but I remember you mentioned something about there needing to be a certain level of macro and micro, so that there's the bigger picture that you can cast, but at the same time there's also what's going on right in front of you that you can also like give situations of, and I think that's also really important as long as something like that is captured. And I think that objective-based games lend itself so much better to something like that. They'll definitely find more of an audience for their objective-based rather than just team deathmatches. Any last thoughts on esports before we get off that subject, before everybody hates me for it?
I really hope that they do well with it. But yeah, we already hate you, so.
All right, well,
for that.
I'm okay with that. I guess I will, I'll have to live. Moving on. Wrapping up with some viewer questions here, guys. James Hernandez asks, my Guild Wars 2 question for the week is, why are still people talking about other MMOs? Well, Mr. James, you would actually know that people aren't talking about other MMOs if you watched Twemo last week or yesterday, when every single viewer question was loaded with Guild Wars 2. So no one's talking about other MMOs. Everybody seems to want to just know about Guild Wars, right? No, but okay, so are you guys keeping your expectations in line for Guild Wars 2? Or have you guys pretty much fallen behind the hype train like Gary has completely? Come on,
wow.
come on.
Little
He's
Jack.
excited.
He is a total
He's excited.
It's kind of
He's
adorable.
not here. Just
That's the best time. That's the best chance for me to do
Gary's
this.
excited about everything. Whatever.
But no, are you guys? Is it well warranted this time, or are you guys kind of just trying to keep it low key at this point?
It's a solid game. Like when I first played Rift, I was like, wow, here's a game that's solid and it's not WoW. I like it because it gave me something different but with familiar mechanics. And then games evolve and evolve. We got SOTOR, which was it was like, wow, this game is just like WoW, except for it also had like the cinematic, this storytelling and cinematic style, which actually make the stories worth hanging out and listening to. So it was something that I was comfortable with, and it was fun. So these games are coming out where they were familiar and they gave us something new to add to it, because we're always talking about what's the next gen game, and I think we all pretty much agree that there's never a next gen game. It's just going to take steps to create. And we'll eventually get to that game that if it were to come out like 6 years prior, it would have been the next gen game. And I think Guild Wars 2 is just kind of taking it up another notch, where you have these voice storylines and you have this dynamic content, but the gameplay now they're actually stepping out and they're saying, but we want to change the gameplay a little bit. So with just the fact that they're doing that, they're creating, that's the excitement for me, is that they're trying something different. So now it's like, okay, I've had my fill of games that play like WoW. How about we try something different? And this and Terra are two games that are trying something different. So that's where the excitement comes from for me.
For sure. I would say that I am both totally on the hype train and trying to be realistic about it. I mean, I understand that no game is going to be the best game for everybody. I think that Guild Wars 2 is pretty much precisely what I'm looking for in an MMO. I've loved pretty much every moment that I've spent in it, and I'm extraordinarily excited. But I'd like to think that I'm not expecting it to be the second coming of Jesus Christ or anything. Which some people to listen, they truly believe that this is the salvation of MMOs.
I think this is a really good example. A lot of people ask questions over on Twemo of if we think that, what will we see as a big drastic change, and we've kind of always said that really the way that they're going to have to do to make sure that people try out their games is take baby steps. And I think Guild Wars 2 is doing a really good job of changing a lot, but still delivering it in a package that we're still very familiar with and can get very excited about, because it's still so based kind of that World of Warcraft style, but still doing it so much differently that it's almost bringing in something completely new.
Sure.
Next up here, we have a question from Bobby Desmarais. Bobby wants to know, do you think people will flood to servers doing exceptionally well in World vs. World? I'm going to go ahead and say yes. We've seen it countless times, especially if they open it up and allow you to do it. You're going to see people get fed up with where their factions are at, and they're going to want to go, or their servers are at, and they're going to want to go join the one that are leading the way. I can see it happening, totally.
Yeah, I don't see it being a flood, but I do see some people being like, okay, my server totally sucks, and they'll bail. I mean, or my world. Don't they have some kind of provisions in that will prevent people from benefiting from doing this often?
Yes.
I seem to recall they did talk about that.
So if you switch servers, you're ineligible to receive the benefits of that week or 2 weeks competition. So you don't like switch servers and suddenly get all the nice buffs from being on the winning shard. They haven't really specifically worded out how that's going to be, whether you're ineligible for just that week or if you're ineligible for 2 weeks, because that would really, I feel, disincentivize a lot of people from doing that. Another thing that would be really interesting is so because after every 2-week match is over for World versus World, servers are rematched based on how they did previously. So if you see a server winning against 2 really crappy servers 1 week and everybody moves over to that server, they're suddenly up in a higher bracket, and maybe they're once again the crappy server. So
really stick it to them and be like, that's what you get for trying to make it easy on yourself.
Well, no, I don't think that they would be doing that intentionally, but like if you win in one competition, you move up, and maybe the competition's a lot higher the next week. So I don't think that too many people will be like joyriding on all the good servers just because they can, because they have a system to disincentivize that a bit, and because it's not super predictable where you know exactly who you're going up with week in and week out.
All right, next question here. Jamie Parks wants to know, do you think the community will ever pull its head out of its ass long enough to be so quick to judge systems they haven't tested themselves? Now, I think this could almost go 2 ways, to be completely honest. He either could be saying that you know, he thinks the community is too quick to hate on, or he's too quick to understand why people are so excited about this game when they haven't played it themselves. So it's one way or the other. I'm gonna go with the fact that he doesn't like the fact that people are hating on it.
I think both of them are kind of egregious things to do. I mean, it's nice to get excited, but saying this is going to be an awesome game if you haven't actually tried it is a really terrible thing to do. I feel like it's nice, like I said, it's nice to be excited, but a lot of it is something you need to experience and kind of evaluate. And I know that people haven't had the chance yet to say that, so I feel really bad for like judging people.
You're an awful person.
I am.
Just rub it in their face some more.
The worst. But yeah, I think that it's kind of our nature to judge based on what we have, and that can go either way, and I think it's bad at either extreme.
What about you, Mike? You got a chance to play it. What would you say?
I'm just like, wow, a world where we don't judge things like just right away. That's what the heck? That's crazy.
No, yeah, I know.
It's weird. So here's the thing: you have to learn to take everything with what is it? A
grain of
spoonful
salt?
of sugar or something?
A grain of salt.
Grain of salt.
Whatever. I was close. And you have to learn to take everything with one of those and learn who to trust. So a great example. This is actually a really great example. Gary Gannon hates Terra. He doesn't like it, and he knew that the minute he got in. But there's a reason for it, because he got in. He was like, these mechanics are not for me. I don't feel like dodging and blocking and having to manage my character to this level all the time. Like because in Terra is like the extreme. Like if you don't know Terra, you know how Guild Wars 2 has the block or the dodge and all of that. Well, in Terra you absolutely have to do that like all the time, or you will get hit. It's very positional based. And that was a mechanic that Gary just could not get over, and that was the end. And the story, like the story, which is fine. I think everybody pretty much agrees the story kind of sucks. But it sucks in most games. So if you know and trust Gary, and you know his game, what kind of games he likes, then you'll probably be like, okay, I know what he likes, so yeah, this is a game that probably wouldn't be for me because our styles kind of gel. And if you know what I like based off the previous stuff that I've done, then you'll probably know if I'm going to like Terra or not. So really, it comes down to you as a consumer, talking to you guys watching the show. Find out whose styles gels with your, and whose opinions kind of gels with what your experiences are. Total Biscuits, GuildCast, Oxhorn. I mean, everybody that does videos, look at those guys and pick who to trust. Don't just go look at a website that says, oh, 10 out of 10, this game's going to be amazing. That's it, the end. Because the game may not be for you.
Are you telling me that I can't love every single game 100% fully and think it's the best thing in the world so that everybody doesn't hate me?
That's the internet.
Oh. All right. Well, there you guys go. Moving on, next question here. Mark, that's all I have is Mark. Mark asked a couple of questions, the first of which being, can we jump in Guild Wars 2? That's actually not this question, but that was part of it. Yes, Mark, we can jump in Guild Wars 2. Otherwise, you could really expect us to be constantly making fun of it like we always do here on Gamebreaker. He also wanted to know, though, will there be mounts? Being a huge world to explore and as much fun as it will be to explore, I cannot fathom exploring such a great land just by running around. Mounts,
but
yes.
that gives you more time to explore it.
Exactly. That's how you explore a great land. If you're speeding
the
by
selling
everything
point,
at 250% speed, like,
of course.
what are you going to see?
That's
I want to fly over it, so that way I don't ever see any of it. That's what I want to do. I don't feel like, especially with their teleport and like waypoint system, that allows you to essentially just jump all over the place. And it's enough places where if you don't feel like walking, then fine, just port yourself to another location. I don't think that mounts are really all about getting around, like transportation. I think it's more about showing off. Like really, it's pimp my ride, man. It's
yes.
like mounts are there as a trophy to show off something that you've done, and that's it. Just like gear, a lot of times gear is like that, especially if it's cosmetic gear. It's like, hey, I've done this. Look at my hat or something.
Elizabeth, any final thoughts here about mounts?
I don't think we've had them confirmed. I don't know that we've had them, confirmed to not ever be in the game at all. But if that's something that we did see down the line, maybe an expansion or something, I'd like it to be something that was really well integrated, maybe with mounted combat. I feel like there needs to be a reason for it to be included, especially because with the fast teleport system, there's not really an actual need for fast travel in the way that we see it, because we have the Asura Gate, so you can move distances very quickly, and you have teleportation. Not to mention that dynamic events make it really fun. At least for me, I never felt punished for having to run through the same area twice, because if a dynamic event was there, like, I had an opportunity to explore something cool, and if a dynamic event was blocking my way, it wasn't far out of my way to kind of go around it if I had already done that or didn't want to get involved with centaurs. So.
So, mounts, we don't know yet, but obviously there's got to be reasons to both sides of it, of if they will be integrated or not. Next up, Ryan asks, are there going to be any normal quests to get from NPCs at all in the game, or are all and any of the quests in the game going to be centered around dynamic events that are in the world? I am also wondering if that is the case, oh my gosh, run-on sentence. I'm also wondering if that is the case, will it not be a huge grind fest to gain levels in that game?
Oh, sorry, I was looking at Elizabeth and she looked like she was ready to say something. So there are the class quests, right, or the storyline chain that you can follow that do have your basic type of quest where you go, you pops up that really cool cinematic, which I absolutely hated at first when they first demoed it. But then when you actually play it and you're not really paying attention to all that stuff, it just works actually. But they have that stuff for your own personal quests, and they have like instance and all that what is it, like chains and all of that. Mm-hmm. But are they saying like will the going out and doing stuff in the open world, like, will that seem grindy? I don't feel like it does. I mean, the thing is, I talked about it in my BFF report, where it's like there's like 3 different types of questing, or like, there's like a spectrum of questing. There's the World of Warcraft type, which is like, I go to you, you give me a quest, I come back, I turn it in, you give me an item, boom, I'm out, right? And there's like the Rift style, which is like right in the middle, which is there's a dynamic events where the Rifts show up and you just kind of walk over and you're part of a party and everybody kind of hangs out and destroys the Rift. And then they also have the point and click quests. And then you have Guild Wars 2, which is almost predominantly, just almost all the dynamic quests, where you just show up to the party and then you have a good time and then you that's it, you helped out. And so I don't feel like that doesn't feel grindy to me, because when I'm done with a quest in Guild Wars 2, I don't have to go back and talk to the guy. And I kept doing it out of just
habit,
like muscle memory. I'm like, all right, I'm done with the quest. Where's the dude? Wait, where's my quest? Well, what's happening? Right? So it happened multiple times, and it's kind of great that you don't have that. You just kind of show up and help, and then you leave. It doesn't feel grindy.
Elizabeth, what about you? Did you feel any sort of grindiness to it?
I didn't. I leveled the character somewhere past 20 in the most recent beta weekend, and I didn't feel there was much grind to it. Something to keep in mind that I feel is either not being very well communicated by ArenaNet or not being very well picked up by the player base is that there are actually kind of 3 types of quest-like events that you can do in Guild Wars. So there's your personal story, which we already talked about, which is very much like a quest. You talk to this person, they give you something to do, you move on from that, you do something else, and that's your story. It is quests, there are NPCs, there's a little green dot that tells you where to go, like that is a quest. Then you have dynamic events, which we've talked about in great length, and everybody knows that that's something that just happens in the world, and maybe it chains on into something else, and if you hang around, maybe the centaur base that you just overtook is going to get attacked again, and it chains back and forth. There's also something called renown hearts that kind of I feel some people confuse with dynamic events. Renown hearts are always there in the world to be done whenever you feel like coming across them. If you talk to a scout who shows up as a little spyglass on your map, he'll tell you that, oh, there's this going on over here, and over to the northwest there are crazy rabbits eating my watermelon or something. And when the renown hearts can be done once, and you get a reward for them. So I feel like they're almost like pacing tasks. Like I noticed that when I had done all the hearts in a map, I was ready to move on to the next map because I'd finished that one and I was the appropriate level to move up. So there's always another option for getting XP that doesn't involve like hoping that a dynamic event springs up in your area.
Well, on the topic of dynamic events, we actually had another viewer question from Aaron K. Schmidt. He was actually disappointed by the dynamic system in Rift, so he asked, are Guild Wars 2 dynamic events more than just Zerg fests? Do they require any strategy? Do they feel well differentiated? Does defending a town from centaurs feel different from defending a town of bandits or ghosts, etc.? Now, I'm gonna let you guys answer this because you guys actually got to experience, but I think there's definitely some fear here for something like a big dynamic event where a big dragon kind of comes out and then the whole world kind of floods to it. But I don't necessarily think that there would be much differentiation between centaurs, bandits, and ghosts. But coming from you guys, what would you say? Would you say, Mike, that one quest where you came back and there was something to do at that farm at a different time, was it different enough for you, or?
Well, yeah, I mean, coming back to that farm after watering his plants and feeding his cows to slaughter a whole bunch of ninjas, yeah, the ninjas part definitely was different than feeding the cows and watering the plants. So whenever you're doing these things, in the upper right corner you have the meter of, like, essentially it's like the group progression or the area progression to finishing that part of the cycle. And then underneath it you also had your contribution points. Now, that particular example was, I think it was one of the renown quests that Elizabeth was talking about. So I don't know if this is something that applies here, but there was definitely a contribution portion, and if I didn't do anything to help, if I just stood around and watched everybody, I'm pretty sure that if my contribution was 0, I'd probably end up getting 0. Correct me if I'm wrong, Elizabeth.
Correct. There are actually tiers for dynamic events of participation, so you can have bronze, silver, or gold participation, or I assume none whatsoever. There were a couple times where I walked into an area just as an event was ending, and because I didn't land any hits on anything, I didn't get any participation credit, which makes sense because I didn't do anything. So if you contribute a bit, like you come in right at the end of an escort, you get a bronze. If you're pretty helpful but you weren't there for the whole thing, or you didn't really do as much as you could have, you get silver, and then gold participation is for people who really were troopers.
What do you guys think about the events being much more like Zerg fests and requiring strategy? Do you think that's going to be a concern that surfaces?
I think there's enough differentiation between different sorts of quests. Some of them are just about like, some of them are very last stand type where you have to defeat, X many waves of oncoming creatures. There are some where you are doing the same thing, but now you have mortars or other environmental effects to kind of deal with to help you. And then there are others that are just totally different things entirely. Like maybe you're escorting these cubs through this area and you have to keep them safe from ghosts. And the ghosts have different, ghosts aren't bringing in catapults like the centaurs do. So in the centaurs, a lot of objectives for dynamic events are destroy the catapults so that they can stop, wreaking havoc on our masonry. Whereas ghosts, you're not really so much worried about that because they don't have their little ghostly trebuchets with them.
Do you worry about? do you worry about at all the level of participation for stuff where you need someone to be on turrets or something? Do you worry about the level of strategy that's going to have to go in between you and people that you really maybe aren't in a party with or have control of in order to get the event completed? Is that going to become a problem?
These events scale, right? So if it's just me, then hopefully the event scales down to the point where there's not a necessary mechanic, or there's not two necessary mechanics that need to be tended to. So if I show up by myself because maybe I decided to fight Guild Wars 2 20 years after everybody else, and so I'm rolling a new character and I'm at this event by myself, hopefully there's not two mechanics, one of actually hand-to-hand combat and the other one being working a turret, because I'm one person, I can't do that. So I'm pretty sure they're going to have some kind of provision in place to prevent having too many necessities as far as like dealing with some of these events, and which obviously one of them would be scaling.
I feel like that's definitely the case. There are not instances, but encounters that are designed for groups, and those are actually their titles as either an elite event or a group event. And those are things where they're telling you, like, you're not going to be able to do this alone. Like, don't take on the 30-foot tall shadow behemoth because you will die horribly.
I'll just dodge.
I'll dodge out of his AoE. It's not a big deal. But so there are things where you're going to be reliant on other players. But I feel like most of the dynamic events that you're going to come across in the world, you won't have a problem handling on your own. One thing I noticed that, especially in the human zone, anytime that I had to do defense and it was just me, there were generally NPCs in the area. So if I'm defending this Turnwatch Redoubt or whatever it was called, an area from centaurs, there are some NPCs on either side of where the centaurs are coming and attacking. So the NPCs need me. Like, if I'm not there, they're going to fail. But it's a lot easier to handle these waves of probably 8 centaurs at a time because I've got a couple NPCs with me. So you never feel like you're just drowning under all these enemies in a bad way.
Well, there you go. Dynamic content. Hopefully it all ends up working out. I cannot wait till I can actually get my hands into the next open beta or closed beta, whatever the next set of invites go out, so that I can actually have some hands-on opinion that I can actually share with you guys. Elizabeth Claire, you can find her at Elixabeth Claire. Elizabeth, what else is going on? You got any fun stuff, or are you just itching to get back into Guild Wars? Is that just...
I cannot wait for them to tell us when the next beta is, and I hope desperately that I'm in it.
Awesome. Well, you and me just both sitting on the edge of our seats. And AKA Mike Bailey at AKA Mike B. Any other awesome things going on, Mike?
Gonna be on Legendary a little bit.
Oh,
I feel like I'm cheating on my
your
show
speech?
spouse.
Man.
Show the Legendary, be like, I love World of Warcraft. Which actually never happens. If you watch Legendary, you know that like hardly ever happens. So.
And me, you can follow me right here at Mike Schaffnitz, Gameplay, Twimo, GuildCast, Legendary. I'm all over the place now with Gary at GDC, but
yeah.
Be sure to follow at Gamebreaker TV for all updates about Gamebreaker TV. We do a lot of news hits throughout the day. It's the best way to get all of your gaming needs and news. So thank you guys for watching. Tune in next week for another GuildCast. See you at 6.